You are a friend of Fugee. You've been a partner of Fugee for 3 years now. I've read a lot of the articles you've written, and in the few times that we've had together, been very inspired by your approach towards philanthropy. Wanted to have a really casual conversation with you today and to learn a little bit more about your work and about your life.
Very honored. Thank you.
So my first memory, which really stands out, is I was together with a bunch of other nonprofits. I was giving a pitch at a pitch session a few years ago, and you were one of the individuals in the crowd. And I think after I gave the pitch, I came and sat down. I think we were seated next to each other, and we got to talking. And you shared with me, I think you showed me a photograph of a document, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then I got to find out that you were from Vietnam. You went to study in America, and that was the time when war broke out in Vietnam, and you became a refugee overnight. And so that really struck a chord with me. I never met someone who had that sort of a refugee experience. Can you tell us a little bit more about that point in time and how it affected you?
No, I still remember vividly that day over 3 years ago when we first met. And refugees, indeed, that is very dear to us. Of that reason, I was a refugee myself, wife and family too. But we were not refugees in the traditional sense, like the people at Fugee that you're helping. We were privileged refugees, but we were refugee in the sense that we could not go back to our home country. There was no prospect at the time because we would be persecuted if we were to go back. And that was a very mixed experience for me, because Vietnam was at a war at the time, a civil war between the North and the South, and we lost the war, so we could not go back. And that was very sad from one point of view. But on the other hand, I also felt peace and joy because the country was at peace. Well, there was no longer a war, and the country was unified. So it was mixed feeling. So yes, we were refugees, and because of that, I have a deep feeling for refugees at any time, anywhere in the world.
Was there a part of that experience that really affected you? Maybe not being able to travel for a period of time, not being able to see family, or the discrimination? Was there anything that you...
No, yes, from a practical point of view, yes. So I had this refugee travel document, and the signatories of the refugee, whatever agreement, the UN refugee agreement is, with that document, if I were to land in a country and I say, I like it here, I want to stay, they would have to take me. So they make it very difficult to travel as with that document. So in practice, that was the constraint, but it has nothing to compare with the refugees who had nowhere to go and who are rejected from country to country.
Yeah, absolutely, it is, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But maybe first tell me a little bit about then your career. You talk about being very privileged, even with the label refugee. But then you went on and became a very successful banker, successful career in banking for many decades. What were some of your successes and lessons learned that brought you to where you are today?
So I started my working life as a refugee, as an immigrant, as a refugee. And I started by working on Wall Street in America, in New York. And to start on Wall Street as an agent refugee in the 1970s was not a good thing, because Wall Street was the global capital of white Anglo-Saxon Protestant capitalism. And to rise in that environment, a person of color had to be smarter, work harder, and subdue his cultural roots for the sake of integration, and that was hard. In order to do that, I had to go through a lot of quote unquote suffering. So fast forward, I did succeed. Early 2000s. By that time, I was living in circumstances that most people would consider desirable, with all the exteriors of material success. The global private equity business that I had co-founded and co-headed was large and growing. My family life was smooth, and yet I felt something was missing, because 30 years in banking and finance have taken its toll, and I was stressed, arrogant, full of desires at the same time. People ask, what you desire? What are you envious of? I said, well, I desire anything that I did not have. I felt empty inside, and so I was looking for meaning. I went on a 10-day Vipassana retreat, which was an awakening. It launched me on a spiritual journey. And ever since then, I meditate every day. I go on retreats at least once a year. I only read spiritual books or spiritually oriented scientific books. So that changed my life, because thanks to my hunger, my consciousness evolved, and it keeps evolving.
So you must have a very different vision for how you live right now. Has it changed how you live and how you work?
Yes. Now, I still work, different kind of work, but the bad thing about the mindset that the majority of people have, the worship of money, and that is the current state of our civilization. There is nothing wrong with money. Money is a very useful tool, but it's only one form of wealth. Wealth, for me, is something that we have and can share, like time, wisdom, quote unquote, networks of contacts, and money is just one of them. But instead of seeing money as of wealth, we worship it. And because of that, we have this, what I call a separation mindset, different from you. I'm different from nature. We're separate. If you push that logic, I can use anything and anyone as tools to satisfy my own interest, my own profit. And that's what leads us to the situation we're in today.
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the head. It's we've moved into a more, from being a collective communal societies, it's so individualistic, where we really use and abuse each other for our personal gain.
Yes.
And I think we see this from individual governments, communities, societies, corporations, at all different types of levels and structures, right?
Yes. As long as we still see a bigger bank account as the objective, most companies have revenue growth or profit growth as the objective, still have GDP growth as an objective, the economy, which is the wrong thing, because we destroy a lot of people and things in the process.
Something in one of your articles, we need to transition from the slave economy to the sacred economy with the heart at the center. So a lot of people could read this and go like, which planet does this man live on? So how do you, when you sit in a room with people in power and people that have economists and policymakers and people that have, and bankers like yourself that have the power and influence to make these shifts and changes, what resonates with them? Because when I look around, I see a world that's broken. I see firstly wars and conflicts all over the world. We see what you said earlier about that separation taking place, a huge amount of economic and social injustice and inequality. So the question I ask is, are our systems broken? Is capitalism, democracy, are our global institutions working anymore for us?
So first of all, I did not say that. It's J. Cohen Gilbert, who is a co-founder of B Lab, which is at the foundation of the admirable B Corp movement, who said it. That he said the current exploitative economy is not designed for the benefit of all. And the source code that runs the operating system of capitalism is called shareholder supremacy, meaning a company exists to maximize profits for its shareholders. So everything flows from that source code. So whatever we're doing, enlightened leadership, conscious business, impact investing even, is going to run up against that hard edge. So he said we need to rewrite that source code, because otherwise nothing will change other than marginally. We need to transition from a slave economy, he said, to the sacred economy. So when I say that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I did not say that at the time, but when we say that, people will say, this guy is crazy. But nowadays, with all that is happening, with the unraveling in the world, they see that. They see that even in their family, with the next gen. A few stories. 2 years ago, I talked at a panel and in Indonesia, and afterward, a young person in his in her 30s came to me and said, what you say resonates a lot. My family wants me to work with our foundation. I said, no. My family wants me to work with our business. I said, no, because that money is tainted. We had a very serious discussion afterwards. And I said, why don't you try to work the family and change it from within? And she said, but, well, as long as my parents are still alive and around, they would not change and would not allow any change. So that is happening. I'm a member of quote unquote philanthropist association. There are some next gen people who say, my parents want me to be involved in the association, in the giving activities of the family, but I have no interest because we cannot build something with one hand and destroy it with the other hand. We cannot do philanthropy with one hand and keep destroying the planet at the same time. And that is happening. And the philanthropists, the capitalists, they're all people like us. They also see that in their family. And so I think we're entering a new era now, and people begin to take notice. So last week I was at a conference in KL, and we talked about philanthropy, and my only message was inner transformation and consciousness raising. And afterwards, a few people came, YPO members, and they say, well, we're talking the same language, but let me ask you, when you share this with people who are well off, how many people get the message? It doesn't matter, because only if one person gets it, it's okay, but how many? And I must admit, right now, not so many. However, among the young people, the younger people, more and more.
That was my question, because people will listen to you and will, I think, no doubt will feel inspired and probably come up to you and say, I understand what you're saying. I agree with you that something needs to change. But when it comes to the actual change, we don't know where to start, or how do we start?
Yeah. Tell a story. So Gandhi, when he came back from South Africa, a lot of people came to India. A lot of people came to him and said, help lead us to independence. And he said, I'm not ready. So he stayed in his ashram in Ahmedabad for 13 years, working on inner purification. And after 13 years, he said, I'm ready. And with his friend, they went on the Salt March, which, as you know, led to Indian independence. So the key is to transform ourselves. Science said no problem can be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. We need to raise to another level. The people have been at war for many, many years, and the war will continue after this generation passes. They can kill one another, and hundreds of thousands of people will be killed decades after decades, and nothing will change until the majority of the people there realize, I'm not a Jew, I'm not a Muslim, I'm much more than that, I'm above that, I'm bigger than that, and we are one. And then the war will stop. My answer is we work on changing ourselves, inner transformation. If enough of us do that, the universe will come and do its job. And the energy in the universe is much bigger than the energy within each of us. That will help. I want to help as many as people as possible evolve. So we will reach the 10%, and then things will happen.
Very spiritual, but I think that's it. I think if we don't recognize that we have the power, then we will feel hopeless, because then you will feel that you can't do anything. The power that others have is too great. The forces are too great, too big. Ultimately, it has to change. This change has to lie with us as people. And I think the role that parents play, you're bringing up the next generation. Now that I feel like the next generation are teaching us a thing or two, but the power we have with teaching our young ones or allowing them to teach us. So a lot of jumping back to philanthropy, you spoke about that a bit earlier. I think maybe you use philanthropy as a vehicle to some degree. Maybe can you define what does philanthropy actually mean to you? Because we know the global definition of it. What does it mean to you for you personally, and also in action as a philanthropist? Because we assume to be a philanthropist, you need to be a very wealthy individual, and you need to have some form of an agenda.
Well, that is the wrong perception, unfortunately. Philanthropy originally means the love of mankind, from the Greek origin. And in other languages, like Vietnamese or Chinese that I know, it also means merciful and kind, that kind of thing. But today, it just means the act of giving money, because we have forgotten that money is only one of many forms of wealth, as I said before. And today, we have what I call the shell model of philanthropy. So the silo, halo, ego, logo model, where philanthropists divide the world into silos. If you do this, I will fund you. If you do this, I will not fund you. Not realizing that all problems are related.
Yep.
And unless you solve all problems, you're not going to solve any problem. Halo, the donors want recognition for their work. At least they want a tax deduction, if not more moral recognition, social recognition. Is based on ego. And it would make a lot of sense if many donors work together because it's the same cause, but they don't, because they don't get to exhibit their logo. That's why I call it the shell model of philanthropy. It's about time we go back to the original definition, which is the love of mankind. Nobody would argue if you say that Mother Teresa was one of the biggest philanthropists of the last century, although she had no money.
Okay, so we shared an image, which I'm going to flash on the screen now for people watching. And it's quite a profound image that you shared. There's four images in this one image, right? So one is the reality, the second is equality, then we have equity, which a lot of people don't quite understand. And then the last image is an image of justice. I think a lot of the world, we understand reality, but then equality and equity is where I think we get lost in that debate and discussion about rights, privileges, how to help people, the best way to help people. And then justice often is never really achieved. Maybe you can talk us through why this image means a lot to you.
The reality is we're living in a very unequal world, and which is becoming increasingly unequal with obscene level of inequity and social fragmentation. To equality is not, or equity, to give a chance to the more disadvantaged and marginalized is a good thing, but it's not enough, because you take the situation today, it is undeniable that the children and grandchildren of rich people will always be advantaged, will always be richer than the children of poorer people. Gap is going to increase over time. So justice is to reach her full potential and thereby allow society to reach the collective potential. And how do we do that? By recognizing that we're all one, that we're not separate, to move from the separation mindset to the unity, non-duality mindset. That sounds theoretical, but with consciousness raising, that is what we should all aim to achieve. And it is achievable, because that is the reality of life. The refugee situation and Fugee and education in general. Philanthropy in education is not about giving access. That is nice, and we should continue to do that, absolutely, because otherwise this poor marginalized children would never get a chance to make any progress. We should continue to do that, but it's not enough, because the inequality, the inequity in the world will keep increasing. People don't have to leave their country because it's no longer livable because of climate change. People don't have to leave the country because of war, because I'm not treated as the majority of the people there, because I'm different. When people realize that we all one, that we'll see. And then you can have people are different. There is no denying that. But that is fine, as long as we care about one another and help those in need. That is the meaning of life.
The narrative happening around the world in Malaysia is, and very recently, I literally read it in the media yesterday, is why help others? And others could be Palestinians, it could be Somalis, Sudanese, it could be the Rohingya. Why help others? Meaning people in different countries, when we Malaysians or the local population still have need, and we need the help. We still need the money. We need the support. Why are you giving financial aid or whatever to other countries? What's going on in that mindset, and how do you respond to people that think purely like that?
If you don't, sooner or later, you will be hit with a problem.
Who's going to help you then?
Yeah, right. Because everything is interrelated.
Yeah. And I often feel sometimes it's a lot of times we don't realize how blessed or how privileged we are, right, in our situation, especially when you live in peace, when you no situation, no environment, no country is perfect, but when you have so much. And lastly, maybe just as we close, to talk a little bit about education and the purpose of education. I think you've written on the education, the change of education over the years, over the decades. Has it really changed? Now we have the introduction of technology, of AI. Children are growing up very gadget savvy. They're digital native. How is that education with AI, with tech, and that inner transformation in a current world like today? What would you recommend to schools in terms, or educators in terms of protecting or evolving education to suit young learners?
I think 30 years ago, UNESCO came out with this framework for education, the 4 pillars of education: learning knowledge, learning skill, learning how to be, and learning how to live in society. The traditional education system has been focusing on the first 2 pillars, learning knowledge and learning skill. Why? Because that produces the workers for the economy. But the economy is changing. With robots, with AI, jobs will disappear. We have been neglecting the other 2 pillars, learning how to be and learning how to live in society. That's why we have a lot of problems we have today with mental health issues. If you take Southeast Asia, Singapore is the richest country in Southeast Asia, yet it is also the country where the suicide rate per inhabitant is also the highest by far. 2 years ago, 2 professors conducted a survey among NUS students. They found that they asked the question, how many of you have contemplated suicide? Guess how many?
40%?
40%. Incredible. These are students who have gone past all the pressures of exams and testing. They have made it into the best university in Singapore.
And yet.
So we need to repurpose education. With AI, college students now do their homework with ChatGPT. What for? Education needs to be repurposed so that we understand that the main purpose of education is for each child to be able to achieve her full potential, and through that for society to achieve its collective potential.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a beautiful way to end this conversation. So thank you so much for chatting with us, and of course for being part of Fugee's journey, for supporting the school education, for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you.
We're delighted. Thanks, Deborah. Thank you for all you do.